This evil Levite has abandoned this poor woman to the abuse of the Gibeonites. She's managed to drag herself back to the house. The next day, the Levite discovers her collapsed by the door, and he simply says to this poor woman, "Get up, let's go." Here's what happened next. There was no answer. Then the man put her on his donkey and set out for home. When he reached home, he took a knife and cut up his concubine limb by limb into 12 parts and sent them into all the areas of Israel. And we read, everyone who saw it was saying to one another, "Such a thing has never been seen or done, not since the day the Israelites came up out of Egypt. Just imagine. We must do something, so speak up." You know, it's heartening to see at least that the people of God are similarly sickened, as you were when you read this story, and they will not let this lie. So chapter 20, all Israel, from Dan to Beersheba, from north to south, they gathered together. Everyone's outraged, everyone's sickened, everyone wants change. For the entire book so far, there has been disunity and discord. There have been factions, there's been fighting, and now at last they are united together. The Levite, the husband, so to speak, of the murdered woman, gives his testimony, and you'll notice it's a selective retelling. "During the night, the men of Gibeon came after me and surrounded the house, intending to kill me. They raped my concubine." Just pause there. There is a gap there, isn't there? And there is a world of sin and shame and fear and failure in between those two sentences. He has conveniently glossed over the fact that he put his concubine in their hands. This blood is upon him. It is his fault as much as theirs. What did he think was going to happen? He goes on to say, "I cut her into pieces and sent one piece to each region of Israel's inheritance because they committed this lewd and outrageous act in Israel." Now the people, understandably, are going to attack Benjamin, their own tribe, all Israel against them, and it's understandable, but their first action ought to have been to bring justice against this man. He ought to have died on the spot and been sent into the presence of God. But he's a sweet talker, isn't he? As we saw in the previous chapter, he's got a way with words, and he's gotten away with it here. What a comfort it is to know that all sins are eventually paid for, that God does not turn a blind eye or a deaf ear, and in the end, punishment is always poured out according to his righteousness. So the Israelites from all sides gather together and they go to the Benjamites asking that the evil men be handed over. Now, what happens next shows you just the complete loss of perspective in Israel, the inability to discern right from wrong. Everyone just seems to act instinctively and tribally rather than righteously, and nobody much knows what they ought to do. So the Benjamites shockingly refuse to hand over these evildoers from among their number. You know, they ought to have been the first people to say, "We will not stand for this in our tribe. We will fix this problem. We will cut the cancer out of the body right here." Instead, they do the opposite. They fight against those attempting to bring justice against these evildoers. Verse 15, "At once the Benjamites mobilized 26,000 swordsmen from their towns, in addition to 700 able young men from those living in Gibeah. Among all these soldiers, there were 700 select troops who were left-handed, each of whom could sling a stone at a hair and not miss. They're unbelievably powerful, skillful soldiers with their attention turned against exactly the wrong thing." And so we have a heartbreaking description of a civil war here breaking out in Israel. The Israelites seem to be intent on wiping out not just the evildoers, but those who protect the evildoers, as in the whole tribe of Benjamin has got to go. And by the end of the chapter, only 600 men in Benjamin are living. There are so many lessons for us to learn here. Two in particular might be helpful, depending on what's going on in your life at the moment. Firstly, be very wary of not just committing sins, but also allowing, excusing, or even defending sins. The Benjamites got it wrong here because they care more about their tribe, their reputation, their people than the glory of God. Here's a sickening application, but a true one. Sometimes in the Christian world, if a horrific thing goes on in a church, a Christian community, sometimes people say, look, we're not going to bring this person to justice because it would bring the church into disrepute. It would be bad for our reputation. It would be bad for the future of the church. We will excuse or even defend this horrific action. That must never be our attitude. God is God. He demands that we take sin seriously, and we should more than most. If something horrific goes on in the church, we should be the first to say, we will not stand for this. So we ought to be very careful that we don't, under the banner of tolerance, allow evil people to get away with evil things. We've got to cut that out of the body. Secondly, when you have been wronged, seek the Lord first, rather than charging into battle based on your own fury. He will see to it that justice is done. It seems here that the Israelites went way beyond the proper bounds of justice, and it slipped for them into the realm of just pure vengeance and fury. Look, sometimes anger is righteous. They had a right to be angry here, but the Lord says, in your anger, do not sin. May God help us to trust Him in these things and to honor Him in these ways.